for Ben. They've got 40 Times and Nexus. So we just saw Nexus magazine in the shop in Glastonbury. To be fair, it is always there. But look, the symposium was supported by Nexus, and we did actually see Marcus Allen walking around the conference. I thought it might be a bit rude to take a picture of him. So on Saturday the 23rd of July, the first speaker was Andy Thomas, and I would go to an Andy Thomas conference. You can forget about everybody else. He's my favourite. I love him. He's brilliant. We've seen him before. We bought his book about Christmas. He's just knows everything about everything. He is so brilliant. But he's also good at talking about it as well. He don't just know shit and then gets up on stage and bores you to tears. He's just brilliant. We loved him, didn't we, Mark?
Yeah.
He's amazing. We bought his new book, The New Heretics. That's bloody brilliant. So what does it say in the book about him? So, Andy is a leading researcher into mysteries and cover-ups, and he is the author of the new book, The New Heretics, as well as The Truth Agenda and Conspiracies, all of which provide real and balanced insights into conspiracy thinking and paranormal research. His many other books include Definitive Guides to the Crop Circle Phenomenon. Andy is one of Britain's most prolific lecturers and has spoken in many other countries. He has made numerous radio and TV appearances and is also founder of Changing Times, which holds events on truth and mysteries. An annual speaker at the symposium since 1994, Andy became co-MC in 1999, a role he continues to this day, and he is one of the core organisers for this event. So his website is truthagenda.org, and his talk was called The New Heretics, and it says, Andy's latest book, The New Heretics... I want to cover him up for us to be a surprise later on. This is professional.
Seamless. But Spielberg uses toilet roll.
I bet that's not all he bloody uses. Spielberg needs more than toilet roll to get himself... Anyway. Dirty bastard. Let's not start about that. Andy's latest book, The New Heretics, highlights serious issues with the way that freedom of expression and choice is being destroyed by an establishment that believes suppression changes people's minds when it doesn't. Recent contentious events and the many polarised responses to them have revealed serious divisions in who we trust and what we believe, fostering suspicion that fear is once again being used to control populations. With hard oppositional thinking present on all sides, Andy looks at new approaches which could make a positive difference to the truth seekers, to the way truth seekers pursue their kept causes. It's very small writing. I've got new glasses. I can't see.
So, Andy Thomas, yeah, as Liz says, a brilliant speaker, absolutely superb. Just puts everything out in such a good way. So good to listen to. He obviously one of the organisers as well as a regular speaker here as well. And made the point that it was the 30th year that the symposium had been going in the hall, and they had 2 online events during the nonsense lockdowns, etc. So the 32nd symposium in all. So he started off the Saturday day in the morning, generally talking about the recent situation, how the powers that shouldn't be are just trying to make everything polarised, and I guess stressing that maybe we need to avoid that, and also in the truth community, for want of a better word, we have to try and understand the other people, the normies, the ones who are going along with the consensus, to try and at least get in their mindset of what makes them think what they do and do what they do, because if we're going to influence them to change their opinion, it needs to come from a space of just trying to sort of at least understand where they're coming from, so you can, I suppose, not this antithesis of fighting against each other. Um, he started off with showing a Times headline: students want more debate restrictions, obviously talking about the censorship and the stresses on people being deplatformed, not allowed to speak. So again, this is the people in control are trying to stop there being discussion so that, you know, people just don't hear those who have got opposing views to them. So I suppose in a way we shouldn't do the same thing and just telling anyone that thinks differently that they're just outright wrong and we're not even going to listen to them. I've just written down the term quantum thinking, which I guess he used. I'm not sure if he got that from somewhere else, but you know, this multiplicity of views, but obviously trying to find the truths on what is most probable and what's most likely to be accurate. I do like he used on the cover here. He said he's got the eye on there, which obviously is used as a, for want of a better word, Illuminati symbol, and he was saying that he wanted this to turn the eye back on them, those who are manipulating power. So that's a good idea. I think it's always good to try and turn people's symbols back on them, or reinvent them, or go back to something that maybe was an originary use of the symbols before people perverted it. Now, Andy, a view maybe which a lot of people, myself maybe included, wouldn't have, that politicians still do matter in the debate of things, and although they are not, in Andy's view, you know, they're not the real power as is put out in the public domain, that they are really in charge of countries, but still, you know, he said it, I think that we still need to focus on politicians and scrutinise them, and it still does matter maybe which of them are in positions of power. So he was, in his view, saying don't ignore politics, obviously be aware that there's more going on behind the scenes and it's not everything, but he, in his view, that Brexit and Trump, the 2016 effect, as our friend Ben would say, did change things in his opinion. He mentions Michael Gove as an envoy for Bilderberg, just as an example of someone that is very much immersed in, want a better word, the dark side. And maybe his public perception is that just he's a bit of an idiot, and stuff in the news about him dancing in nightclubs, and again distractions, maybe, you know, that maybe he, you know, people like that do have more power. So I guess for positive and negative reasons, he was saying we shouldn't ignore the political spectrum. He talked about the Russia-Ukraine war, and in his opinion, Putin wasn't fighting the New World Order, as a number of people do think. He referred to someone called Terry Baldwin, Threeman, spelt as in the number 3, Threeman.org, just who had an analysis. It's all a pattern that's happened before, where they set up a country as being the fall guy. He mentioning in World War One, or the lead up to World War One, it was Serbia, and obviously there we had all the shooting there, Sarajevo, I believe it was, that officially, so in the history books, kicked off World War One, although there was obviously more behind it. But this idea that there's a smaller country that's set up by bigger nations to be this sort of fall guy, and then they take the brunt of the conflict maybe, or that's what kicks things off between other countries. He was talking about how the US were scared of Germany and Russia getting together at some stage, so that America was trying to create conflict, I think he was saying, between Germany and Russia. Just some interesting sort of views on the current political situation. So he was, I guess, not wanting to reject outright the mainstream political arena, but obviously he believes that there's a lot more behind it. Secret societies, other entities or bodies, shall we say, that are trying to manipulate things. He talked about what's been happening in the last 2 or 3 years, the hypocrisy, obviously, of in the current Russia situation, Ofcom blocking RT from being just viewed by anyone in Britain, but and then they go and criticise Russia for censorship, and they're just doing the same thing. He mentioned how anti-lockdown demonstrations, huge numbers, which barely reported, erroneously reported, or just ignored by mainstream media like the BBC. He wanted to stress, very important, that maybe there were certain things where truth community weren't focusing enough on, and he mentioned the online safety bill, which I'm not quite sure where it's at, but it's imminent at least. And as part of that, obviously they mention, as they do, they tend to actually, they focus on things which might actually be needed and good, but they obviously twist it and then slip in things which they're using for their benefit to control people. So a lot of the online safety bill does talk about, stopping online grooming, that sort of thing. They've also got this very ambiguous clause in it about where the government can basically also prevent anything being shown online which is, in their words, lawful but harmful. And of course that is completely open to their interpretation of what is harmful. And as we know with what's been happening, any talk about anything that goes against their agenda, they can say that's harmful, and under this legislation they can ban it, and probably maybe even do worse, I suppose. If it's legislation, then I imagine that they can criminalise people as well. So, again, talks about hypocrisy, obviously talk about climate change, but he mentioned some news reports where countries around the world have opened new oil, gas and fracking. So saying, that they may talk about climate change when it suits their agenda, but they're actually going against even what they say is the way forward by, still opening up some new oil and gas. And another thing, like with the online safety bill, he was stressing that people should be doing more. They should be getting out there. They should be protesting more about this. They should be spreading the word how dangerous this is. And people are not giving it enough attention, even in our community, if you like. There's not enough stress put on how damaging this will be. And another thing you mentioned, maybe not enough people are talking about the insect decline, in the amount of pesticides. He showed a picture of a field, but just no insects there. The destruction of environments in that way. That is the real thing. I think one of the other, not a speaker, but someone who seemed good, but I wasn't really aware of before. I think Gary King, his name was, but he was one of the speakers forum, which I think comes on later on this day. But he said, obviously, there's a differentiation between environmental or pollution and obviously the man-made CO2. What I would say as a con, that was a bit controversial during the talk, as I'll mention later. One or two counter voices to that. And he mentioned all the fear being put on children, And then at the same time, they're talking in the mainstream media about a rise in mental health issues. And what a surprise, it's not easy. It's not hard to see where the links are and what's causing what. So he put some hope out there, mentioned Neil Oliver on GB News, how the World Health Organization, where they were trying to put this in place, where there was this new rules where basically all the countries in the world would sign up to this treaty where anything which they termed a pandemic, in future, they would then have control of that country's response to the pandemic, and obviously that would then give them permission to put all these sort of things in place. That was knocked back, with some countries refusing to sign it. Oh, that's my little signature tune. So that was obviously a good thing, but as we know, they're not going to suddenly say, all right, well, we give up and we won't try and do nasty things anymore. They'll be back, maybe in another form, but they'll be trying to do that again. So have to keep focusing on that. You mentioned there's a lot of floating people in adverts. I hadn't really noticed this.
Yeah, that was good, though.
Not that I
No, but floating like off the air as if they're ascending.
Yeah, levitating.
Like I think that is buying subconsciously into what people think about Armageddon and what's it called?
Like the rapture and that sort of thing.
That's what I think. I think that's we don't watch the telly, so we don't know anything about adverts, but he put up 3 pictures of these adverts for things which I don't know. And there was all these people floating up. He was like, oh, is it ascendant? So I'm thinking, no, mate, that is trying to put the rapture idea. So it's shaking that idea up subconsciously in people's heads.
Very interesting, yeah. Well, I suppose one man's rapture is another man's Armageddon.
No, the rapture is Armageddon.
Well, there you go.
Ascension.
There you go.
Mark never read the Bible as a child.
No, but what I mean is, just the Armageddon as destruction, but then for people who think that they are the chosen ones.
Yeah, but they're not going to be putting that in adverts if it's a good thing, and maybe it's going to play into the blue beam. Who the fuck knows? Well, but it was interesting to see.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you notice any adverts or any films or anything where people are literally floating up, like in that I read all the books, what was it called, and it was really stupid films.
Taken or no, not
it had that bloke in it.
Well, there's been about 3 makes of it. Nicolas Cage was in the more Hollywood.
Because I used to be a Christian back in the day. I read all of those bloody books. I had it then.
Well, we can add this because this is not a live stream.
You carry on talking and then I'll shout it out and scare you in a minute.
Right, well, I'm almost done on Andy. Basically, he just finished off with nice tributes. As I say, it was 30 years in the hall. He mentioned someone who I'm not aware of, I'm ashamed to say. Michael Glickman, I think, spoke at the symposium before. And he mentioned Ian R. Crane, who's someone that we would wholeheartedly endorse as being a great figure, someone who was very comfortably off as like working for oil companies and that sort of thing. Could have had a comfortable existence the rest of his life, but decided to live in a caravan, protesting fracking, and was very involved with that. So yeah, that's...
Keep talking, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, but I've come up to the end of Andy Thomas.
I don't mean... Put your password in there. Taken, no.
Well, it's something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I've read them all.
Yeah, I know. Was it? See, this isn't a live stream. We can add it on.
Yeah, but why be professional now?
Why break the habit of a lifetime?
You know what? We do something like this, really professional. We gain one, and then we put one on me stealthy video in Mark, and then we lose one. So you got to pick a side, because we're a bit stupid, but also we're very informative. So if you just want informative, then I wouldn't bother subscribing in the first place.
Yeah. I haven't got it.
I was looking. You was talking.
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, so the new Heretics.
Keep going.
Yeah, so, yes, we bought the book and got it signed.
But we could listen to Andy all day long.
But, yeah, I mean, he said that he has put in here a number of points where...
Left behind!
Left behind, everybody.
We can stop. Right, so the next speaker was Jez Hughes, and he was my favourite as well. He was bloody brilliant. And we saw his book before we came in. That caught my eye. Can't we see it? That caught my eye before we even went in to see him. I love all that, because I once wrote something and then took it down about why a shaman said, why do we, in this country, why do we lock up the shaman? I actually, in my old website, I did a blog about that, but anyway. So it says, Jez says, my healing journey began when I experienced a fit that propelled me into an altered state of consciousness. It took a long time to find healing for the mental disturbances it initiated. This journey took me through healing and spiritual traditions across the earth until I finally came home to shamanism and found practical methods to cure myself. Jez has featured in the national press, TV and radio and magazines including Sacred Hoop, Natural Health, Kindred Spirits and Soul and Spirit. His first book, The Heart of Life, Shamanic Initiation and Healing in the Modern World, was published in 2015, followed by The Wisdom of Mental Illness, Shamanism, Mental Health and the Renewal of the World, late 2021. So it's secondsighthealing.com. Okay, there he is. Just want to see if there's any more about him on the other side. So yeah, the information it says about him on here says, Jez explores how traditional shamans undergo years of mental distress as part of their initiation and sees how their approach can be applied to help heal the current surge of mental health issues in the West. He investigates the cultural biases around mental illness and our uneasy relationship with altered states of consciousness, which might hold the key to healing many symptoms. Clinical trials of psychedelic medicines show extraordinary potential in treating and enhancing mental health, and unusual states of consciousness may even have helped us evolve as humans. So you might know, if you know me, I'm really interested in this, and I've been really interested in Jerry Marzinski and Sherry Swiney for a long time now, and we had a little chat with him afterwards and sort of explained a bit about Jerry and Sherry. It's something that I'm very interested in. So that's
another really great talk, Jez Hughes. Started with a bit of an overview of shamanism, the importance of it to indigenous peoples, those communities. Obviously, it's in different forms. It's something that's been found across the world. It is still present in a number of places across the world in hugely different geographical locations. He particularly, Jez Hughes, has spent a lot of time with this tribe or community in north central Mexico. So he spent a lot of time with them, actually becoming immersed in shamanism there. So the shaman has multiple roles within the community. Basically, it's very much intrinsically linked with the life of the community, and it's a vital importance. Part of their role is to go into the spirit realm and find out where animals are going to be. So before people go off to hunt, they use their intuition or their shamanic journey to try and trace where these animals are going, and then to take the hunters there. So as he was saying, if the shaman gives them the wrong information too many times and they go somewhere and they don't find an animal to kill for the village to eat, then obviously that's going to get them in trouble. So it's vitally important. Also, they're involved with controlling the weather. Obviously, healing, finding lost things is something that's people often come to them for. So they're just intrinsic to the communities. And he talked a lot about how people are, I guess, chosen to become a shaman. They almost, I guess, maybe reveal themselves because they are, from an early age, maybe they reveal signs of what we would now call mental illness, which is obviously, where he's coming from, about the links between shamanism and what we would call mental illness. And so people might be having fits, as he experienced himself, sort of tics, verbal things coming to them, or visions. And he was saying how it's a traumatic thing. It's a very arduous process, and they I've written so much here. That's right. Let's wind back slightly and just go through this.
He was so good.
Yeah, I mean, he did cover a lot in a short space of time. I mean, he was, going to look at then the consensus views of shamanism in Western culture, particularly, or the westernized modern world. He brought out some quotes from people where they were talking about the people who were called the shamans being on the edge of insanity, and that was a prevalent theme that, obviously, along with the narratives that have been going on for centuries, that indigenous peoples, pagans, they're inferior, they're a less developed form of humanity, even subhuman in some interpretations, giving more modern, supposedly developed powers the right in their eyes to conquer them and control them. So within that, shamanism has seen, obviously, you see people as probably we've all seen footage of the shaman being in like a trance, and it doesn't, it's like someone who is mentally ill. If we saw that on the street in the UK, for instance, we'd say that person looks to be mentally unstable. And so that was people writing about shamanism, in the West. A couple of quotes from the early 20th century, they referred to it connecting or selecting mentally unstable people to be the shamans, and then sort of giving them this privilege within society. Mainstream is horrified by what the other, something that's outside their common perception. And in the same way, in our society, the mentally ill are this other that's demonized, and people don't want to face up to it and want to lock it away. So what he was referring to, this shamanic sickness, this where people in these communities that in adolescence, as unfortunately is often the case now, adolescents now are starting to show signs of mental illness. But in adolescence, maybe a future shaman would start hearing voices, seeing visions. But Jez was saying, there's not like a romanticized view of the spirit world that some people might have. It's all angels and nice little spirits. It's very much a violent world and a traumatic world to be a part of. So it's not. They certainly don't view it as being all benign, but it's these shamans can have access to this world and then bring back knowledge which will help the tribe, the community within the material world. Jez himself had his first fit when he was 14. I think Liz might have read that out. And then he said there was a history of mental illness in his family. But as he put it, he's now made a career out of it. So he's learnt to sort of overcome the things that he's experienced, and I suppose channel it into shamanism through spending all this time and immersing himself in it. He said quite often that a shaman or a future shaman will act up, will break taboos. Again, you can have parallels in this society. Someone who's mentally ill will do things that are considered inappropriate and not how polite society would behave. But just was saying, even in our society now in the West, people, or in more recent times, people sacrifice their lives for ideas, an ideal, whether it be, communism, that they're, or some sort of national identity. So ideas can have a life force that will propel people to do incredible things or bad things, but they can have they can take on a life of their own. He's saying too much reality can stop things being done. It's a sort of repression. He mentioned, I think is it the Wixarika? I'll mispronounce it. This community or tribe.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah. So he said they go on a pilgrimage.
Is it in Mexico?
Yeah, it was Mexico that he spent all this time. But he was saying how people, when they're going on this pilgrimage, they try and reverse everything and throw things up in the air, if you like, to get rid of the labels that we put on things to change reality. So language is changed just for this pilgrimage. Everyone gets new names, and apparently it mixes up the sexes as well. So I think he was called something like Veronica or something. They got like
such a good
names.
It was so good.
But everything's renamed. So trees, rocks, things that they'll come across on the pilgrimage, they make up new names for them. They're completely different.
It's sort of to get away from all of your preconceived ideas of what that is as well, I think.
Yeah. So it's a complete looking at the world completely differently.
I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, which is something which I think art in all its forms ultimately that's what it should be about. It is at least making you look at things differently.
Yeah, but they're also doing that in a bad way. For example, the swastika.
Yeah,
that's just one example. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
About how they're changing language, how they're changing.
Yeah.
They are literally changing it for a bad way as well. But these people were doing it to get more of a clarity of their reality again.
Yeah.
Like see it from fresh eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. As part of the experience as well, hallucinogenics, in Mexico it's peyote, so they take lots of peyote. Again, that's breaking down reality, so you don't get caught up in belief systems. You see things in a different way to how you would normally perceive them. As he was saying, if this happened spontaneously in the world, it would be terrifying. I did think in my novel The Individual, because suddenly language, people can't understand language, everyone no one can speak the languages that we normally speak, and everyone's like a sort of Tower of Babel sort of situation. So if that just suddenly happened to us all, it would be terrifying. But I suppose within the structure, that's the thing, within these shamanic practices, they're giving a structure to these things that would be terrifying or would be harmful, but maybe because it's within a community, it's age-old traditions. It's throwing reality up in the air and changing perceptions, but it's done in a way where it doesn't destroy people. But I suppose maybe from what he's saying, it's the shaman that often does take the most damaging journeys on. They go through all these years of preparation and they have all these visions, and it's a traumatic thing. And sticking with language, Jez was saying how loss of language is one of the diagnoses of mental illness. When people suddenly can't remember what you call something, that's a sign of mental illness, because language, I guess, is one of the most, from the early age, it's the building blocks. We know what things are called, and if suddenly you can't remember the name of them, that's, it's sets you adrift in a way. So, some people can shut down, with mental illness, get depression, so they just can't do anything. Others are overstimulated. He was talking about where you can see meaning everywhere, and I suppose that can be some would put that criticism of people in the truth movement, where they see all sorts of things and say, oh, that's a sign of this or that. But also there's another downside, of course, for mental illness. Comes out in addictions and self-harm. But he was saying madness is always something culturally specific, so or the way you deal with it. And in our culture, we drug and criminalise people that are considered mad, mentally ill. But yeah, in the shamanic community, they create a cultural container. Is, I think, the term he used, which just makes it sounds a bit better than what I was saying, where they've got a way of containing it. So although they're altering perceptions and they're changing reality, it's done within a ritual discipline. So they mimic these mental illness symptoms within these pilgrimages, rituals, but it is done within a particular ritual framework. So I guess, at the end of the pilgrimage, they will go back to farming, doing whatever they need to do in their life. Something would have happened, is I suppose the aim, to themselves or the community or the world around them through doing this pilgrimage, that will benefit them going forward, but they still will need to day go about their lives to get their food and build the houses, whatever they need to do. Just talked about the West's treatment of the mentally ill. In the past, it was considered that people were possessed by the devil and actually could be invoking the devil when they were mentally ill, and that then obviously they were ostracized, or far worse, killed, locked away. He talked about the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, saying they had maybe there was a bit of a mixed situation there. The madness was seen at some point as being a gift from the gods, but then there was this sort of split with the rational I suppose the beginnings of what became our sort of supposedly rational scientific way of perceiving. He mentioned that the origins of the word melancholy, I think going back to Greek, literally means black bile, and hysteria means wandering womb. So hysteria has been traditionally connected to women or associated with women in the past. So looking at, I suppose, those early days then of giving it like that there were physical, the mental illness came from something physical within the body that had changed, and that then that something physical needed to be changed back again to resolve the mental illness. So, and then up to coming into our present day, this biochemical model, where they're saying that mental illness is due to an imbalance chemically imbalance in the brain. We've been listening to Jerry Marzinski talk about how there's no proof of this as well, the serotonin. So
and it's just literally come out in the news.
Yeah, and there's been...
He's been saying it for years.
James Corbett was analysing an article, or article mainstream, when science is saying this, it has been for years. They haven't proved that serotonin does anything to actually... the chemical imbalance whole... it's a story, it's a fabrication, another one by pharmaceutical companies so they can sell their product.
It literally came out.
Yeah.
They admitted it.
I talked about in the past the horrible lobotomies which they used to do to treat for depression, literally basically putting an ice pick on the brain, literally trying to take a lump of the brain away. This guy, Walter Freeman, ironically his name called Freeman, won a Nobel Prize for coming up with this, and went all around America. And it was, it's still, I don't think that's still done officially anymore, but it went all over, and it was removing a part of the brain, and Freeman himself said, oh, well, if someone, they can't create anything anymore, they can't do those sort of things, but they can at least be, they can do menial tasks and
they can't be poets, they can't be artists, but they can wash the floor.
They can be slaves, basically. So, electroshock treatment as well. Of course, we probably
still going on
in some form. But yeah, that was a horrendous thing that used to just really, it just literally used as a control mechanism to try and wipe people's brains and control them, really, when they were thrown away in these asylums. And we've come now to, as I sort of jumped ahead, this what's been termed a chemical lobotomy, with serotonin, all these drugs that are prescribed, and he referred to how between the First and Second World War there was like sterilisation program. A number of people were sterilised because they were seen as being undesirable. So there was in the eugenics movement that was prevalent in major people, as we know, in the West, that are still in power now, but under a different, they call it a different name, but they didn't want undesirable people to reproduce, and you could say things like that are going on absolutely now. So this Psychology Today had literally just published this article just before the talk that we saw, I think on the 19th of July this year, that no evidence at all that this low serotonin imbalance, that this is the cause of depression, mental illness, all this lie that's been causing this huge industry and lots of misery for people that have been taking those pills for so long. He referred there was some hunger strike. I didn't write down when it was in America, from people that had been victims, and they were asking for evidence that this actually did any good. Anxiety as well, that was something that's been promoted in the media. Again, Beecham's, he said, were wanting to get into the market for anxiety. So again, they were sort of promoting that these things can be resolved by drugs. Well, Liz has written down, taking the pill is the spell. I think he was talking about placebos and nocebos, you know, where there's an expected negative outcome if you stop the drug. But yeah, quite often placebos, where there's not actually anything there, but people psychologically think they're taking something that's going to make them get better.
Maybe that's what he said. He must have said that.
All right, okay. But anyway, he goes into, well, there's also been a number of studies recently talking about psychedelics and the use of psychedelics to help mental illness, people with mental illness, in very low one-off doses, have had huge effects. And he just was obviously relating this back to shamans. For shamans, the plants have the power. That's where they get the psychedelics, the basis from them. I mean, there's been studies. I think John Shoemaker, he quoted about the average age for onset of psychosis used to be 30. Now it's 14. And in a generation or so, we'll all officially have it, maybe by their definitions. So yeah, what's it called? Psilocybin, yeah. So what's from magic mushrooms, basically. Jez was talking about how they grow on dead grass over cultivated land. So it's sort of out of death comes this life, or this connection with something extra. Reminds us maybe that things are all interconnected. But yeah, he referred to a John Hopkins trial, single dose, were given to a number of people. They talked about getting a feeling of unity, and this then persisted just after one dose. It did lift them out of the depression or the whatever form of mental illness they were suffering. And there's been a number of other studies talking about how these psychedelics can be a way out of mental illness. So, but obviously, again, I suppose that would need to be in a controlled way, and the trouble with all the drug industry, and I mean by that the official legal one, but also the unofficial one, where people are taking things and it's not controlled, and it's not at base actually really intended to do them good. But maybe there is something where these psychedelics, they can help people get to some sort of this connection, maybe with something that's beyond the material, something spiritual, for the want of another word, and that can help people overcome whatever it is in this world that's causing them such pain and mental trauma. And I think Jez mentioned how mental illness, it's like you go through a sort of ego death, and after that, you can then maybe start to experience this unity of perception that everything is all interconnected. Where we are now, there's such an imbalance of nature, the world, that those who are most sensitive are the ones that are perhaps suffering the most from it. So yeah, but yeah, fantastic talk, and we talked to him briefly afterwards. Seems like a really good guy. He does an online course. He was talking about an introduction to shamanism, and then after that, some intensive course, 3 years in a forest or something, which sounds...
Well, I've spent 50 years in a kitchen. It can't be much different to that.
There's a kitchen shamanism. That's maybe the course we could offer.
Oh, get me, show me a new thing.
Which?
For me borrowing. Got that for me drum.
Get off your borrowing. Get on it.
So then it was the Saturday forum, so the panel. So from left to right, we had Mark Devlin, then we had Sky Academicist, that brilliant one that did about their health. Andy Thomas in the middle, Torbs, he's a musician, he's really good as well. And then, what was the name of the lady? Nancy Paulette. She was from Holland, and I think she did a thing about crop circles. You could have gone on a little walk or something. We didn't do, I think.
Yeah, there was a tour on the Thursday before the...
right, there was a tour on the Thursday.
Crop circles, yeah.
She didn't have to look like Maria Wheatley. What is it with these women that do crop circles? They all there's like a factory of them. They all look the same. And then Gary King on the end, who was absolutely brilliant, wasn't he, Mark? I don't know what his speciality is, but I'll let Mark have a look at it. So in the book, it just says, in a brisk question time-like format, Andy Thomas leads a panel discussion between our guests, some speakers from the weekend and others making a special appearance for the forum. This is the audience's chance to ask questions from the floor to inspire some helpful and fascinating thoughts from the panel on matters arriving from the weekend subjects and many topics beyond. Over to Froud.
So, just a few points really. It was just a good little discussion. It was quite, I'd say inspiring as well. I think Skylar again was very, she was very passionate in talking about how people need to come together to try and fight what's been happening, because it's such a terrible war we're up against, basically.
She was good.
Alternative therapies. Obviously, she's a healer. Alternative therapies are being repressed, have been for some time, and that's increased. Children children being taken away. I've just written down that random comment, which is I can't remember the context of it, but I know in some places, with if people haven't conformed. So basically, we need to try and get together to get back to fight what's obviously a very strong, coordinated attack against humanity, really. There was Nancy Paulette, as Liz said, she's from Holland. She mentioned things that she was involved with in Holland. Obviously, it is. I was about to say it's in the news. It's not in the news, mainstream news, because obviously they don't publicise anything that might be seen as damaging to the agenda. But I think he might be filming the sink. But they good, it's not me. Excellent.
Mark, what are you going on about? I've got a picture of the forum. I'm not videoing the sink or you. I've
Just
got
as
a
well.
photo of the forum.
Seamless.
I'm
right.
just after your bloody... I was just after what you had to say. I'm not so sure now.
No. Okay, so the farmers in Holland have been having huge protests, which has been clamped down on, but they're fighting back, and lots of other people are joining in the protests because the farms are being taken away by the Dutch government as part of this net zero thing, which is coming in around the world. So there's a number of protests going on about that. Gary King mentioned, I think, what's happening in Sri Lanka, again a similar thing, where the climate agenda, the net zero, and how they're taking land away, destroying farms, people who farmed land for years, and of course this is all amidst when they're talking about impending food shortages. So obviously it seems like a great time to stop people farming. He was talking about how Monsanto have basically written the rules of this World Trade Organization, their new rules, which is all part of this agenda. Around that, Zorbs was saying about trying to do things locally. Torbs, sorry, I thought
Orbs or Zorbs.
I thought you were Zorbs. Sorry,
that
Zorbs.
sounds like somebody from Flash Gordon. Torbs.
Yeah, Torbs. He was saying he's involved with something locally. Crops. He lives in Glastonbury. Crops, not shops. So again,
sounds good. That
trying to I get children back in. He was saying get children back to the land, looking at growing plants, looking at animals, looking at nature, and try and get them connected to the land. When obviously the agenda they're pushing is all this stuff about eating bugs and eating synthetic foods. There was Mark Devlin on the panel as well, so he was he mentioned his opinion that cheap flights were promoted in recent years to get people conditioned to this idea where they jet off multiple times possibly to Europe, etc., on holidays. So then after all the nonsense when they couldn't go anywhere, and then people so conditioned that they want their holidays abroad, that now and recently when they've been now bringing in these extra controls and saying you've got to have all these vaccine passports, and obviously they're looking down the line to bringing in all this digital ID stuff, and people will just be desperate to have their normal holiday in Spain or wherever, that they will do whatever to maintain the travel that they've been conditioned to having. I will have to check out Gary King's work. I'm not familiar with it at all, but he has studied semiotics and linguistics, and
he was very good.
He was good. I think he's looked at a variety of things. But I'm just looking back at a DVD of he did a previous symposium. He's spoken at symposiums before, talking about typesetting and that sort of thing. So he's very much looking at symbols and language, which is obviously right up my street. So, and lives in Bristol, so he's not far from us. So definitely have to check him out. But he was talking about how the coloured flags dividing people. All these sort of symbols and language that are being used to manipulate the situation, people's perceptions. Toxic loneliness, this is written down here.
Yeah, that's what that Sky was talking about. She was saying loneliness kills more people than cigarettes, and she's talking about lockdown, and I sort of took that on as also working from home. We all love it, don't we? But what are you actually doing? You're taking yourself away from people, and that resonates with me. I wanted to set something up at work years ago called Stepping Out, where all the clients that are socially isolated actually just started making up a network. I did something a little bit similar, didn't I, on my YouTube thing? We had a little Zoom meeting, and now we've actually got a WhatsApp group, 3 or 4 people that just, I quite like bringing people together. I'm not a people person, so as our WhatsApp group would tell you, I sort of like, yeah, it's a good idea, let's all get in, and then I don't have anything to do with it. So, yeah, love you Zoom buddies, but sorry I'm not there all the time, but I'm glad you lot are. So yeah, I love the idea of getting people together and fighting loneliness, even though I spend most of my time and my life in my kitchen by myself. I'm a paradox. Carry on.
I think maybe we'll leave it at that really, but yeah, in general, just bouncing some ideas off, and I think Skylar, although I haven't sort of said many things which she actually came up and said, I can't remember specific words, but just generally that passion to inspiring. We're a bit under attack, and we need to fight back, and people need to get organised. I think she said, we're not good organisers in general. Maybe people in the truth community, a lot of us, we're sort of free thinkers, creative types, whatever it may be. So in terms of organising, and also we react against people trying to organise movements, because we know that they're so often manipulated, and so it's a bit of a conundrum there, but really it's maybe something that we need to try and
they were
get
all
over.
sort of like all coming to the conclusion that it all boils down to love. Yeah, fair enough, but she was the only one that said love doesn't mean passive.
Yeah.
And I resonate with that, because I get pissed off with all this fluffy shit.
Yeah.
Because, love, but that doesn't mean just sitting down singing Kumbaya. She said it's not passive love. It's,
Well, I think that was maybe harking back to, I think, mention it in her actual individual talk. She was saying we've got incredible strength because we are, if you believe in reincarnation like she does as well, we've got all our past lives, but just our ancestors, our family, our genetics, the history of us, and also our communities that have come behind us and have come through incredible traumas to get to where we are, and we've got that strength, that survival, overcoming, that is within us as well. So that was the love of the people before us that got us to here. So that's love as well. So love is, love can be fighting for what the people that, your family or yourself. So it's, good point. It's unconditional love doesn't have to be a wishy-washy thing. It's strength, and it's fighting for the things that matter.
So, after the forum, and was it after lunch? I can't remember. Yeah, it was after lunch because it was 2:30. Patrick Henningsen, and he was really good. Patrick is a UK-based American writer and global affairs analyst. He is a founder of the independent news site 21st Century Wire, co-hosts on the UK Column News, and hosts both Sunday Wire and TNT radio shows weekly. He's a dedicated advocate of free speech and a fierce critic of Western mainstream propaganda and foreign policy. Patrick has written for numerous international publications and has appeared on Sky, ITN, LBC, RT International, Al Jazeera and The Liberty Report, as well as on the ground conflict reporting, including work in Lebanon, Syria and Iraq. He holds an MA in International Relations from Plymouth University. So his website is 21stcenturywire.com. So his talk is called Overcoming the Illusion, and it says Western civilization is on the brink after centuries of unprecedented prosperity and innovation. The advances and freedoms we have enjoyed are disappearing as governments work with big tech and corporate media to sanitize and censor speech online, while propaganda is beamed directly into our smartphones. Seeing through the media illusion has become one of the great challenges of our time. Why is the ruling establishment so afraid of independent media outlets, bloggers and social media users? We must look to the past for solutions.
Yeah, Patrick Henningsen, someone I certainly read a few articles by. Very good writer around the recent situation. Probably, I'm not sure I've read him much before that, but I think he was viewing things as almost like this is a natural cycle of civilizations where they go through. I think he talked about like 1,000-year cycle. We've had lots of talks about cycles with the yugas and other things, but he was saying civilizations tend to grow and become maybe bloated and oppressive, and then there's a reaction, they degenerate and fall apart. And he sees it as being this sort of, we're in this sort of entropy phase now where this corporate monoculture is breaking down, but maybe it's sort of these trying to restrict society while it's falling apart, maybe as a sort of clinging on to power type situation. He talked about how changes have come about in the past which have maybe led to a greater democratization of information getting out to the masses, and changing how society is, because people get access to information they didn't have before. We talked about how the printing press, when that was invented by Guggenheim. Anyway, the printing press greatly revolutionised information, along with the growth of literacy that came up alongside it, and then so many ordinary people that previously didn't have access to lots of information. Pamphlets like Thomas Paine's Common Sense could be made widely available when people were able to read it. Later on, radio came in and lots, changed how people could get information, and now we've got the internet. But along with all these changes, of course, there is the control which the ruling elites, or whatever you want to call them, will then use those new mass communication devices and use them for control, and also try and censor the free flow of information on there that other people might use. Just as an aside, he mentioned, I may have been aware of this, but somehow it passed me by, but it was just like, what, really, when you think Nick Clegg, who was the Lib Democrat leader and was the I don't know what the official title was called, the deputy prime minister, I think, when there was a coalition government, but he's now vice president of the what's his term? Global Affairs and Communication at Facebook in America. And it was just, he was always just perceived as some sort of bit of a bumbling idiot politician, but maybe there's he's higher up than we think. He's got this now role with this Facebook, trying to influence everyone's thought. The term disinformation, Patrick was saying, was invented by Stalin. Now obviously the media talks about disinformation, which they say people like us put out, but of course it's the other way around.
And misinformation as well.
Misinformation, yeah. He made reference briefly to the BBC documentary, which I haven't seen, wouldn't really want to see. It might be a bit cringy, where they, put so-called anti-vaxxers and made them face all these supposedly independent scientific experts about why they should take the vaccine, and these were experts who were intrinsically connected to Pfizer, for instance. He said actually he thought the anti-vaxxers came out well. So
I bet they weren't even anti-vaxxers though, because it's not about being anti-vaxxers, anti-vaccines. This isn't a fucking vaccine.
No.
I wish they stopped using that as a psyop.
Absolutely. Talked about fascism, the state punching downwards. Everything's blamed on the mass of people. All the problems are down to us rather than the actual people in control. But what Patrick was saying, the institutions are actually undermining confidence in themselves because of what they're doing and the misinformation that they're putting out.
So an example of that is they have a go at us for not putting our yogurt pots in recycling while they go to these big conferences about climate change in jets.
Absolutely, yeah. He went back to the Greek idea of the noble lie, an ennobling fiction by rulers where they believe that it's okay for them to deceive the rest of us because it's for their greater good. This idea that they're allowed, they're given a right to manipulate what we do because it's for the best because they know best about us. He referred to Malthusian population control and offered birth rates are plummeting. They were plummeting even before the current madness, so God knows what sort of state they're in now.
Japan can't catch up.
No. I think that's he made. Yeah,
they were saying that about 10 years ago.
Yeah,
about Japan.
Yeah, and well, it's becoming widespread. So yeah, they're not going to have a birth rate that can maintain society, maintain levels, and obviously that's again part of what they're doing with everything else.
Just a coincidence, nothing to see here.
Creating shortages. He did make mention of the Georgia Guidestones, which obviously.
Me and Mark went over on holiday over there not very long ago, didn't we, Mark?
Yeah.
And nothing to do with us.
Don't tell them all about that,
nothing
Liz.
to do with us.
Oh dear, you've ruined our secrets now.
Sightseeing.
You thought we were in Ireland. Oh dear. Well, yeah, he had a little thing on his presentation where, if you like, a little triumvirate of the recent times, what the mainstream projects as causing all the downfall of society, all the problems that we've got. It's Russia and the virus, or viruses, if you're bringing in new things they're talking about now, and climate change. Russia, virus, climate, and then he just sort of switched them round. What it actually is sanctions, which the West are imposing on Russia supposedly, which is then increasing prices and shortages. Here, it's not the virus itself, whatever that may be. It's the lockdowns which have been imposed by the powers that be, and it's not actual climate change. It's the net zero policies which they're bringing in as part of their agenda, which they say are to redress climate change, but obviously I would say that's a lie, and these net zero policies are going to cause even more shortages and misery. So I think he talked a little bit briefly, false flags, Gulf of Tonkin that led to the Vietnam War, how we've been manipulated, all these years.
He was really good.
Yeah, he's a very good speaker, very knowledgeable. But he's saying totalitarianism is where it gets to the level, because of the control, where the mass of the population are policing themselves from the ground up, and we've seen that.
Oh yeah, do you remember on Facebook? She's not banging her pan.
And I think that was very. I think just before last Christmas, I think that was quite evident, where they didn't even in Britain anyway, they didn't actually bring in hardly any at all actual lockdown restrictions again, but they just put all this stuff out in the media. Oh yeah, it's virus is going round again, and you don't want to meet up with Granny at Christmas and kill her. So
you
people
never met my granny. Joke.
So people were voluntarily locking themselves down. People were cancelling Christmas parties. They weren't told by law, or the venues weren't shutting down in most cases, but people were just withdrawing voluntarily because they were policing themselves, if you like, and locking themselves down. So he mentioned Chomsky and how in the past he'd actually written very well in his book Manufacturing Consent about how people are manipulated, but now sadly he's one of those that's just become another maybe it was all along, but he's not practicing what he preaches, and now is wanting the unvaccinated to be locked away or restricted. So
Dickhead. You
bless
did a
him.
little chat about him.
Really radical.
Did a talk about him, didn't you?
I mentioned him in the past. I mentioned him
in the future.
Our heroes can not that he was a hero of mine, but can have written very well about something like that and have a lot of pertinent things to say, but then completely contradict themselves later down the line. But yeah, what's being pushed, as we know, is that this technocracy will solve all the problems, which they say have just randomly come up, and obviously are not, rather than blaming themselves for what they've caused. But as we know, and as Patrick was talking again, scientists are corruptible. This idea that they've got some degrees and they're very intelligent at this or that means they can't be corrupted. You just got to look at the funding that they're getting from whatever it may be, governments, pharmaceutical companies. So you've got to question then where the money is and what's influenced him to find what they say is the truth, and a lot of it's been obviously proven to be wrong. Other institutions, the media, alternative media has grown up and is increasing in its reach because the mainstream is so bad, because it's just more and more people are just turning away from it and they're looking to alternative media. So the internet in some ways there is giving a challenge to the people in power. And hopefully, some people will change their opinions. As he said, I think other people have said that these days ignorance is not an excuse because the information is out there. But he shows a little image, which is a nice little symbolic one of, got it up in our path, I've got to pull up the weeds, but where you get it's just a blade of grass coming up through concrete, how it just, grass that nature can just break through concrete. So a blade of grass can do that. Even us, even in the minority, we can break through oppressive layers that are over us. He warned that there would be a shed load of winter propaganda coming our way. I suppose none of us would be particularly surprised about that. There's mention here, I'm not sure if that was a question, it came up in a question or in his own talk, but about how it came out evidence in the 50s there was a lot of floods, but it was actually admitted that there was seeding by the Air Force. I think there might have actually been someone who made a question afterwards, but he did mention, I think, there was another one of these little pushbacks which are nice to see, even though we don't get carried away. But in France there was recently a rejection of the vaccine passport. The opposition MPs overturned Macron's plans to keep going with this vaccine passport or increase it.
We're probably going to have all our videos taken down because you don't say V word, C word. So we'll get even less people watching it. So probably get about 1.
And that'll be me.
Carry on.
I finished.
Oh.
Yeah, very good, very interesting talk.
I thought you were going to go on.
Yes,
mad old
slightly
bat at
different.
the end.
Yeah.
She was a mad old bat.
He did have some questions at the end, and there was a woman sat at the front who very noticeably was the only one there who had a mask on. So he thought
there was another woman, but she wore it on her chin the whole time. And she was really nice. She just had it on her chin the whole time. I don't know if she had a cold chin, but she was a nice woman. But this one was an old mad old bat.
So I mean, as a number of the people during their talks talked about, we need to, understand other points of view, not, go, they're terrible, blah, blah, blah. There's still people and we've got to try and...
She wasn't.
...talk. But, yeah, this woman asked a question. She said, I take my mask off so I can ask the question.
I've worked in the healthcare service for 70 years and I'm just going to remove my mask to talk. Right, all right.
And... Well, she criticised Patrick. She said, you say climate change isn't a thing, but you give no evidence. So he said, well, that wasn't my talk wasn't about climate change, but she
says you're dangerous.
but there is a lot of evidence to dispute the mainstream. And he did quote someone whose name I can't remember.
He quoted a few people saying that, well, if you want to look into it, go and look into it.
Yeah.
And then this other bloke from the audience came up with loads of stuff to, he knew what he was talking about, aimed at her. But she was just trying to make a point that I will be here, I will wear a mask. And it was just so obviously virtue signalling. Fair enough if she wanted to wear a mask. So whatever, but she had to sit right at the front and declare over the mic in front of 200 people, I'm wearing a mask, I work in healthcare. Well, I work in healthcare and I'm not wearing a mask and I've got very uncomfortable pants on. I never said that, Mark. They didn't need to know.
And neither did our audience here. So so I mean, it in a way though, I mean, although it was, felt a bit of, I suppose what we could say is a bit sort of bad energy from this woman. But on the other hand, when you're just going to just going to a conference and just hearing and talking to loads of people that have the same opinion as you, if anything's going to change, then I suppose there has to be some sort of dialogue with people that think differently. I don't necessarily think this woman was maybe wanting to have a dialogue, but she was there, and she certainly, from what she was saying, wasn't, didn't seem open to the other points of view. So it seemed that she was there from a confrontational point of view. So we just run on to the next speaker, Dirk Campbell, and just explain a little bit that we
walked out.
We did walk out.
We didn't do it in a protest way, because I'm not fast enough to do it in a protest way.
You sort of did it.
Oh,
you weren't happy to.
No, I didn't like him.
No.
I didn't know him. I don't know the bloke. I don't know the bloke.
No.
I just.
Okay, so
I wasn't happy.
So I'll explain the context. So there was this question from the woman, or not really a question, but she was saying climate change is, dangerous threat, and you're, by just saying without evidence that it doesn't exist, that's dangerous. So it just so happened the next speaker, Dirk Campbell, he is an environmental activist. He's been arrested a number of times.
Oh, we like to tell us that.
Yeah. It's in his blurb here.
Court case pending.
Yeah. Anyway, he said that I agree with this lady, what she said. It's it is real, climate change. It's not a matter of opinions. It's backed up by science. So I suppose they got our back up because following on from this other woman, and I suppose as well, although we need to have discussions with people that don't think like us, but at the same time, I suppose we've all of us felt attacked because we've been in the minority of society, and obviously you've got the media, you have work colleagues, and luckily not us, but for a lot of other people, even in their own families, they've had criticism and been ostracized by family members and friends because of how they think. So I suppose from that point of view, after all this, when you are in a situation where you feel comfortable with people that are not all 100% thinking the same ways, but in general open to the similar ideas, and someone's thrown back the mainstream view, which is what we've been talking about, how that's destroying life, sort of thing. It can throw off the energy, sort of thing, and it's sort of like, well, we have got a space where we can talk about things openly with people without feeling that we are just a minority of one or two. So so that did sort of get us up a bit, but that wasn't the reason for his talk. That wasn't the subject for his talk, although he's involved with that. He's actually a composer and instrumentalist, specialising in world music. But in this symposium, he was talking about the Kurds and their experiences in the Middle East. So he was born in Egypt in 1950. And he's researched over decades and acquired skills in the traditions of Asia, Africa and fringes of Europe. This is regarding music. And he lectures on, among other things, music in remote antiquity, bagpipes of the world, the use of ethnic music in Western composition. But in this talk, he was telling the story of the Syrian Kurds' defeat of the Islamic State group, their struggle to survive as a people, and their unique experiment in living a solution to the world's problems. Dirk says, I learned this story through my daughter Anna's commitment to the Kurdish cause and the sacrifice of her life during the Turkish invasion of Syria in March 2018. The introduction of fascist policies by the UK government is an alarming trend when considering the regimes in Turkey and Syria. Unregulated capitalist economics threaten our environment, climate and our species. Could the Kurdish alternative offer a way forward? So I did start, I'm interested in, lots of things. So, I was interested in hearing a little bit about the Kurdish situation. I know they are an oppressed minority and from what I understand it, their traditional homeland crosses several countries that are now countries. So that one of these situations where these people live in an area and then countries have formed modern boundaries, borders, which sort of cut across the area where they used to live. So they end up being a minority in various, across countries like Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and they have had a lot of persecution. I know Saddam Hussein infamously did a lot of terrible things to Kurdish people. So I don't doubt that there is a horrible struggle that they've been fighting there. So I was interested to hear a bit. So we did hear a bit of what he was talking about. I think we maybe just needed a bit of a break.
So then after dinner, was it after dinner? After lunch? Because anyway, 5 o'clock, God knows. It was Barry Reynolds. And it says here, during the 90s, Barry was one of the world's leading crop circle researchers, founder of the Sussex branch of the Centre for Crop Circle Studies, later Southern Circular Research. Barry held a number of senior roles within CCCS, including Global Database Administrator, where he amassed an enormous amount of material, including the most comprehensive archive of 175 Sussex crop formations. I think we saw all of them, didn't we? Work and family meant that Barry had to leave his circle research on the back burner, but early retirement has allowed him to take a fresh look at his archives, using new ways of visually presenting crop circles to see if this brings us closer to understanding their purpose. So his talk was called The New View Over Crop Circles. Barry's professional IT background has helped him realise that technology has moved on. Enable him to give a new view over the placement of crop formations within the landscape. Using his extensive knowledge and cutting-edge software, he has produced incredible flybys. But previously, I ain't got my glasses on. Not previously possible. Superimposing Sussex crop formations from different years onto the landscape in the same videos, Barry says, kick back and enjoy some video. No, he doesn't. He says, kick back and enjoy the beautiful Sussex scenery, dotted with stunning aerial images of the formations as we fly over famous places like Sisbury Ring, the South Downs and the Long Man of Wilmington. Basically, he got Google Maps and he bunged pictures like silhouettes of crop circles on it. And so like there was one in 1972 and then there was one in 1993. So basically in that field you could see where and how many crop circles there was in that field. And then exactly the same in the next field. And then exactly the same in the next field. And then exactly the same in the next field. And then exactly the same in the next field. And then exactly the same in the next field. And then exactly the same in the next field. And then exactly the same in the next field.
Okay, so yeah, I think we both felt that he was sort of building up to some revelation that this transposing these crop cycles over different periods of time over the years in the same areas, and how, you know, they're going to show some sort of cosmic alignment.
I was expecting like the face of George Soros to appear or something.
But there wasn't. Basically, what he'd been doing, and that's what showed. I think maybe it's one of these things where he's a sort of a techie guy and one of these sort of a recorder and that sort of research type thing. But maybe down the line, someone else, maybe Andy Thomas,
because he is God, as far as we're concerned. Not even joking. Andy.
Anyway, more of Andy tomorrow on Crop Circles, funny enough.
And it was amazing.
That was illuminating. But anyway, not to jump too far ahead.
No.
But I think maybe it's one of these things. This could be useful, and looking at how different crop circles have evolved in the same location. And he was talking about how it was. Some of it was in location of ancient sites, like sort of, men drawn on a hill or what.
Oh, the aqua thingies. Oh, no, that was Andy. Oh, shit.
Okay, anyway, we won't... But anyway, it's maybe something that will be a useful resource.
It did show that they are in the same place. Like there's like 5 over the years in that. It did show that, there must be a reason why they keep coming back to the same field again and again and again and again. And
there was a connection. Well, they were often in the vicinity, at least, of ancient sites or something like that. But we'll talk more about crop circles later.
So the next guy was Todd Akamesis, and he is the husband of Skylar Akamesis, who we loved. And so it says here, Todd says, as a remote viewer, astral projector and brainwave entertainment researcher, I've developed spiritual development tools for inducing deep and altered states, teaching everyday people how to access hyperspace, the afterlife and beyond. I set out to search the afterlife for my loved ones and to get closure and say goodbye. Not only did I get closure, but I also discovered the biggest truth about death. I didn't have to say goodbye. Once I learned how to find my loved ones in the spirit worlds through astral projection, I undertook another journey to discover if we're alone in the universe. My journey in hyperspace revealed that we live in a thriving multiverse, teeming with human and non-human intelligences. So he's got a Facebook, just look, Todd.Akamesis, Akamesis. His talk was called Remote Viewing, The Biggest Secrets About Reality Revealed. Todd says, we don't need disclosure from dishonest governments. We just need to learn how to access the gateways through the ancient traditions available to us, including remote viewing. There are over 200 planetary bodies in our solar system, including 8 major planets, several minor planets, and tens of dozens of moons. All of these 200 plus planetary bodies have parallel dimensions in hyperspace, some of which have emergent life forms, and some of which regularly visit Earth. In this talk, Todd takes us on a tour of our solar system by sharing his visits to the planetary bodies. My encounters will thrill you, my findings will excite you, and my insights will inspire you. Now, there was a queue out the door, extra people to come and see this talk. Andy was like, "This is gonna blow your mind." Are you going to talk about his beginning bit? So I won't bother.
Well, if you can do it, you can do it.
No, you do it. Wait, no, you do it. No, you do it.
You
Wait,
do it.
I'm just going to put the pictures in.
We do the thing. You do the thing.
Yeah, Todd came across as a very nice, engaging guy, funny, entertaining. Particularly the start of his talk, he was talking about these synchronicity walks that which he does sometimes. I think in London mainly. Apparently they're on YouTube. Haven't checked them out, but they might be quite entertaining. But basically, just sort of drops leaflets in random places, as well as places where you maybe expect people to go that are interested in spiritual, etc. But these are basically arranges to meet at a certain spot at a certain time. A few people turn up, and then he has like a sort of a dice thing, but sort of with, I think, colours on and this sort of thing, and things like follow the white rabbit, and basically it's an idea of just letting yourself be ruled by synchronicities. So for instance, if it's like a number 6 on the dice and someone walks past with a 6 on their shirt, then you follow that person and see where he takes you. He came up with a very funny story about following some guy because one of these random synchronicities had come up with the dice or something like that, and he followed this guy.
Don't forget there's 20 of them.
Yeah.
He leaves leaflets lying around saying...
I said leaflets. I mentioned leaflets. But yeah, there was about 20 people all following him, and they're following this guy who's completely unknowing. They were sort of sneaking behind him at a distance, and this was in like around central London somewhere. Soho. And I didn't want to give anything away but yeah, he sort of went in this door, and they followed him up these stairs, all these 20 people. and the guy knocked on the door, and the woman opened it and then saw Todd and these 20 odd people behind him, and like reacted in shock. And then the guy turned around and suddenly, oh my god, he just realised, and it turned out he was about to visit a brothel. So so then he was like, what the hell are you doing? And Todd explained what it was. And this guy was like to the madam, actually, I'm going to go with them. Yeah, he was saying about you need uncertainty in life to... I suppose it just occurred to me now, but in a different way, an unstructured, less disciplined way to the shamanic tribe in Mexico that Jez was talking about. But you need uncertainty, I suppose. It's a way of, or something different way of perceiving the world to shake you out of the routines, to try and perceive things in a different way. And he's also just done that in his own life. He hitchhiked across the US. I think again, just take, very randomly where he ended up, without sort of definite intentions of where he was going to, and then later did. I don't know if we mentioned it. He's American to start with, but
he's American.
But now living in the UK. But he also hitchhiked around UK. But again, very randomly. Nothing like, he didn't actually hold a board up with any particular location. He actually had a sign up saying astral planes, and he said someone stopped and said, "Do you want to go to Gatwick?" And he was like, "Not those kind of planes, no." So he'd also apparently taken a lot of psychedelics, which some people might say explains what comes later. But he was talking about DMT, about accessing non-human realities, different planes parallel to our world, different layers of realities, and he was saying that we have fears that come in that stop us accessing these other realities.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think I do too. It's saying we all do have unconscious out-of-body experiences every night when we dream. And that, he said, particularly when there's reoccurring dreams, he was saying that's, a sign that we were travelling somewhere. It's there's something multi-dimensional to it, and it's not just simply something random happening in our head. And he said, you can get these little synchronicities and little glimpses of glitches in, I won't say glimpses in the Matrix, but that kind of thing. He describes himself, I think, as a consciousness explorer, higher physics of consciousness. He made reference to, obviously, something which has been documented, that the US government, at least, did have remote viewers. They probably still do, but it was the official story was, they had remote viewers, some decades ago, that they were using for military purposes to try and carry out surveillance and maybe even assassinations, that kind of thing. But they were using remote viewers for their purposes. He studied, Todd himself, under a teacher, a remote viewer. Todd said he had a near-death experience when he was 5 years old, and it was from that he started to get all these experiences. Age 6, lucid dreams, out-of-body experiences. He used to describe the difference between the material world and his experiences in other dimensions as sleepy house and wakey house when he was a kid. He sounds like he didn't have a great childhood. His dad was violent and a drunk. He says he was bullied when he was a child, but one particular bully that made his life hell. He was taken by a sort of a guide to see this another dimension where he was actually friends with this bully, and that made him very emotional and upset that he was friends with this kid in another world, but not it. But why are they enemies? Why is he tormenting him in our world? And he said after that he sort of used to shower this bully with kindness and giving him things, and that actually turned this bully around, and he became a friend, or at least stopped persecuting him in this world. So he's involved with controlled remote viewing and also astral projection. So he said he has got some system randomly of writing places down, and got some system where he tries to see if he's got a connection with a certain place before he'll try and project to it.
He writes 100 places down, puts them in envelopes, and then I think he meditates on the envelopes and asks it a question, and if he gets 9 out of 10 yeses, he'll go to that one. It's something like that.
Yeah. Well remembered. He said sleep disruption helps to project beyond the material world. I think his message basically is everyone can do this. Everyone has this ability, or can access it. He was saying, that he, I think, was trying to get to the moon to see what was really on the moon, and if some things that people write about what's going on there are true. But he said there was always something stopping him, and he seemed to think it was some sort of military thing, as if it was like maybe military remote viewers that were coming into his projections to say, don't do this. He says meditation prayer helps to connect to other dimensions. So, as mentioned in that opening sort of blurb that Liz read out, he said there's all these multiple dimensions within our solar system, within all the different worlds. That there's all these different layers of afterlife, whether it's different dimensions or existence of people that have died and their spirits. And he was saying that he's managed to get through to visit people in these different dimensions that have talked to him about what their worlds were like. I suppose it's something where maybe personally it's difficult for me to immediately accept when people talk about that, but I'm not saying I don't believe him, and I don't believe people like him have done that. I do believe there's different dimensions. I do believe there's a spiritual world. There's different dimensions to existence. There's different levels to where we are. The material is not all there is. I've felt that for most of my life, really, as far as I can remember, without any strong definitions. So and I do believe that there is astral projection, remote viewing. These are all things that are possible. So it's interesting, it's fascinating. I suppose I always just have that little maybe it's something that's holding me back, that's I'm caught in the material world and conventional beliefs that make it difficult for me to totally
it is fear.
Believe that. Well,
but we also know that trauma and psychedelics can help you break through.
Mm-hmm.
And he's experienced trauma and psychedelics. But because we haven't experienced it, of course it's going to be difficult to imagine,
Mm-hmm.
Of course it is. We're very open-minded, but of course we can't 100% relate to that because we've never done it. That's all that is.
Yeah. And I suppose it's that thing, where material-minded people say seeing is believing, and turn it around and say believing is seeing. So I suppose maybe that's...
it's letting go of fear.
Yeah. And I suppose that's when he was talking in, the first bit about those synchronicity walks he does, and just, doing these random things and just going off with that, and that's all about breaking down those barriers.
And we want to actually start doing some of those. We're going to make up our own, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
I want to start doing some of those, like synchronicity walks. Actually really got me excited, that did. That really, that resonated with me.
Yeah. And
by doing that, who knows?
So that was an interesting end to the day, Saturday.
Oh, bloody hell, that'll go on the edit, won't it?
There's Mark Devlin. There's Colin again.
I'm here. I'm still alive. I survived.
There's Gemma. There's everybody else. And bye.